Hey, this is Patrick Curtis, CEO and founder of Wall Street Oasis. Today we have a great chat with Luca. Luca came from a really interesting background, studied in South Africa at one of the top universities there, ended up moving to London to become an auditor and an accountant. So he basically had to work at BDO. He learned very early on that it wasn't easy to transfer from accounting to investment banking. Listen to how he was able to make his break and how he was able to leverage WSO Academy. Enjoy. All right, Luca, welcome.
Hi, Patrick. Good to see
Yeah,
you again.
appreciate you joining us today. So it'd be great if you could just give the listeners kind of a short summary bio, where you from, all the good stuff.
Sure. So originally from South Africa, I studied at Stellenbosch University. I did my studied accounting at Stellenbosch University, and then I moved over to London where I joined BDO, part of their audit division. And throughout this whole process of trying to become a chartered accountant, I always had investment banking and particularly M&A at the back of my mind, a career path that I always wanted to follow and get into. Didn't fully realize how difficult and challenging that was going to be moving to the UK, especially coming from an audit background. So, reached out to the academy, definitely gave me some very good advice to make the transition. And now I am working at a company called PCB Partners, and I'm an analyst, an M&A analyst in their buy side team. And I've been at the firm for almost 2 months now and really enjoying the work, especially compared to what I was previously doing. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, first off, congrats. Great outcome, obviously. Let's go all the way back to just Stellenbosch
Mm.
and what you were doing there. Was it something where did you know of investment banking then at that point, and was there no like finance degree that would have set you up better when you were kind of thinking about that back in undergrad?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. So, no, I was thinking about it then, although not, 100% certain that that's what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
But I would
Were the
say
were the parents pushing you to accounting because like it's safer or was
yeah,
it? Yeah.
there was definitely a bit of that. But in saying that, it's very different in the UK than to what it is in South Africa. It's to get into investment banking in South Africa, probably the most common route is to first get your chartered accountancy, and then you can often get that through an investment bank, or you can do it at an audit firm and then transition to banking. So I assumed it would be similar in the UK, and learned pretty quickly that it's quite unconventional, that route. Um, but nothing is impossible. So, and
Did you know when you were at Stellenbosch? So you did a bachelor's and was it 3 years?
I did a bachelor's and then a
And then
graduate diploma. Yeah.
like yeah, a post grad as well, kind of
Mm.
stacked right after that. Did you know when you were there in terms of like your recruiting, were you trying to look into straight to banking in South Africa? Were you looking to accounting firms there, or were like you were like, hey, I definitely want to go to London and only applying to London roles?
Um, no, so initially so like I said, I was very set on pursuing the chartered accountancy designation. I had studied 4 years, and like I said, it was a common route to banking, but I had to
Yep.
finish the 3 years of training. We call it articles. So coming to the UK, it was obviously very different. But I was exploring options to do my training at an investment bank. There's a couple of banks in South Africa that do offer that,
Yep.
but around my third year of university, I was very set on moving to the UK. I really wanted to live here, so that drive kind of overtook where I was planning on doing my articles. But in the end, most likely it's relatively difficult anyways to do your accountancy through an investment bank in South Africa. It probably would have been tough, but I was definitely at that point, I only had London, UK in my mind, so was
Very
very,
cool. Okay,
very
so
much
yeah, it was
focused on
very
that.
much like region specific. Hey, I'm gonna just get
Hmm.
there and I'll make it work. Talk to me a little bit
Correct.
about like Stellenbosch, its status in South Africa in terms of like, would you consider one of the top universities?
Hmm.
And then the few people that do get straight to banking in South Africa, is it from Stellenbosch sometimes, or is it more like other schools?
No, it's so in South Africa, I would say it's definitely one of the top universities. It's pretty much Stellenbosch and the University of Cape Town that are the main feeders into
Okay.
roles into high finance or
Hmm.
law. Um, Stellenbosch has the best accountancy degree in the country, like depending on which metric you're looking at, but
Yeah, yeah.
definitely one of the top ones. And a lot of people getting into banks from Stellenbosch University for sure.
Got it. So you're kind of, but you're saying I'm going to go to London. So talk to me a little bit about the process of recruiting for that first role. And you ended up at BDO UK
Hmm.
as a trainee auditor, right? For to
Yeah,
try and get that CA, you got to do 3 years,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
talk to me a little bit about that whole recruiting process. Where most of your applications, did you submit to try to get any spring weeks or anything like that in the UK? Did you try, or is it more like, hey, I know I'm just going to go to, an auditing firm to get this CA?
Yeah, no, I didn't try and do any spring weeks or anything. I needed to come over with a full-time
Yeah,
role.
right.
Um, moving is difficult enough to try and balance not having a full-time role would also be pretty challenging.
Hmm.
And in terms of recruitment, I mean, I'd signed and for Deloitte in South Africa, but like I said, I wanted to move to London,
Hmm.
and in London there were only Deloitte and BDO at the time offering sponsoring South African
Okay.
students.
Okay.
So it was really those two options, and applied to both. Got into BDO, so took that opportunity when it came.
Awesome. So you moved to London in 2000, early 2022, it sounds like.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And what was that like? Was it as amazing as you thought, or was the cost of living a shock?
Yeah, cost of living was definitely a shock, and it was just about. I mean, I moved over in February, I believe in September, October of that year is when inflation really started going through the roof. And obviously coming over first job, it's a very basic salary, so that was challenging. But what made it easier is that, like I said, BDO actively recruits South Africans, so I didn't come over alone.
Nice.
Came over with my brother and a lot of
Oh,
my friends
amazing. So you
from
have like a
Stellenbosch.
little support network in
Yeah,
London too.
yeah.
That's awesome.
There were a lot of us, so that definitely helps. And there were also a lot of people that I knew working at BDO because they hired a lot of South Africans. So that definitely made it easier, but still had to adjust to the city, different lifestyle, and not working.
For sure. So you're working a few years in now. Was the thought process at that point like, okay, you're starting to realize it's difficult to get into M&A or banking or even
Mm.
several years in? Was this something you realized pretty early on? And then talk to me a little bit about like what you were doing. I assume you were working 50-ish hour weeks, 60-hour weeks. Or was it
Ye-
more like 40, check in, clock out standard?
It was initially, I would say, probably more like 40, especially as you join.
Yeah.
You're not that experienced yet, so you're less useful.
Yeah.
But with audit and depending on the time of the year, you can really pick up. So I definitely had some bigger weeks, but definitely something I think BDO particularly prides himself on is the work-life balance.
Yeah.
And
So,
in
but you're
terms
probably
of
I'm guessing you're getting paid around, if you're comfortable sharing, around 30,000 pounds, 40, something like that.
correct,
Something in
yeah,
that range. Okay.
yeah,
Okay. So it's not easy to live in London on that. You probably had some
yeah,
flatmates and stuff.
correct, yeah, yeah, definitely had a house share.
Yeah.
Luckily with my friends. Yeah, it was definitely tough, but not impossible. Moving to any city first job, you're not expecting to be driving Rolls Royces on your first week, but but yeah, it is all fine. I mean, I was also poor at university living on an allowance, so at that point I was quite used to it.
Yeah. And so you're so yeah, at what point did you realize like this is going to be tough, this transition? Was it after networking a bunch or
No, it was pretty much immediately because, like I said, it was something I wanted to do. So I started speaking to people at the firm as well as more senior people, as well as people, other South Africans in banking.
Mhm.
Um, and they gave me the whole rundown of how the industry perceives auditors and um, that the transition
What
would
did
be
they
tough.
say? What did they say? What's the
They,
honest view of
they
auditors?
said they said they just don't like speaking to auditors. He said recruiters won't like you either.
Hmm.
No one really take you on. You have to put it in your own hands. And
Yeah.
from what I noticed, like the cohort 3 or 4 years above me, as soon as they qualify, often a lot of people leave, and they were largely going into accounting roles in industry, working for companies.
Hmm.
That was never something I wanted to do, but I saw majority of people doing that. So, and obviously when people do that and they try, I don't I personally think some people don't try hard enough, but then they
Yeah.
just say it's impossible and they give it up. And I don't think I was willing to make that
You weren't ready to
decision that
just go to
quickly. Yeah,
industry and hang up your hat and just be an accountant for the rest of your life. Yeah.
exactly.
So, okay, so you're basically at your, I think you joined us in November-ish for the November cohort 2024.
Mm,
When you were kind of approaching that or thinking, obviously, you ended up making the move about 4 months later, but had you kind of started the networking? Let's talk a little bit about that and just the numbers. So,
yeah.
let's say you'd reach out or email or LinkedIn request 100 people. What did the numbers look like for you in terms of conversions? Was it the typical
So
20 to 30% accepted and 10% of
no,
will get on the phone? Tell me about that.
so yeah, initially my tactic was to reach out to all the South Africans in banking that I know.
Great
They don't
tactic.
even, sorry, they don't even have to be people I know, just
Hmm.
if you're South African, I message them. And because a lot of similarities, that connection rate was probably higher than what it else otherwise would be. But
Hmm.
that list of South Africans runs out very quickly.
Yeah.
Um, then I just started messaging just complete random people, and that success rate was, I mean, very low.
Hmm.
Um, from speaking to other people, maybe mine was slightly higher. I always tell people maybe 20% accept the connection request, and of that 20%, maybe another 20% actually reply and chat to you. So
Hmm.
it's definitely a bit more of a numbers game, but probably the most important part of the whole process, I would say. So definitely worth the time and effort.
And so when you started that, was it something you were kind of starting to do before Academy, or then once you got into Academy with the CV review and were ready to
Mm,
launch? Like, did you, I guess my question is, did you spend a lot of time like on the story and the other aspects of the Academy in the front end before like scaling up your networking, or is it something you had been doing before joining us and then you joined us more to kind of polish?
no, no. So I would say in the beginning, it was more, the basic stuff when you start applying, polishing up your CV, the story, like you said,
Hmm.
learning some materials for interviews. But yeah, the networking really started scaling up through WSO and their advice. Yeah, that definitely helped.
And then in terms of the like numbers, was it something where like you were now talking to 3 people a week, 2 people a
Mm,
week, 10? Like what did it look like when you were running? I know we say 3 to 5 is kind of our goal to get
yeah.
students to. Were you getting up to that with a full-time job or were you kind of a little bit of
Um, so I did the majority of it in December when I was on holiday.
hmm.
Um, so at that point wasn't working full. I was working full time, but I was on holiday.
Yeah,
And that's all I did. And at that point, I was getting three a day. So
amazing.
probably I would say maybe say 15 to 20 a week.
That's
And that was for,
that's an incredible rate. And so was this
yeah.
because you were this was you I assume you exhausted the like you said the South African
Mm,
affinity group pretty fast. So were
mm.
you also looking at like former accountants in banking or were you just going just any banker, boom, just spring?
I also did former accountants,
Yeah.
but again, that list runs quite short. Um, and if they don't, I don't know, if they're not from the same country or university, connection request acceptance rates are pretty
Low.
low regardless.
Yeah.
No, then I just started messaging everyone,
Well, that's
basically.
I mean it's
Yeah.
amazing that you got to that many people. What do you think it was? Was it like a special message you sent them on the intro request? Did you say something like magical? Because that's like to get to 3 a day is pretty good. Were you supplementing with cold email on top of the LinkedIn?
No, I didn't do any cold email.
So this is all LinkedIn, like we
All
suggest.
LinkedIn. And I
Yeah.
would just a caveat on the 15 to 20, that would last it about a month and a half, I would say.
Hmm.
Um,
And then dropped off.
and then drop talk. I mean that, yeah, at some point. had to resume my job.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then also was trying to meet people in person. I find
Huge.
that a lot more valuable, which was particularly tricky working a full-time job.
Yeah.
Trying to meet them during my lunch hour, but they're super busy, so
Half the
I have
time
to be
they don't show
flexible.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I have
yeah,
to be
yeah.
very flexible. Yeah, so definitely, yeah, just ran into people. That was mainly my strategy.
You
Um,
got to
yeah,
what, like 50-ish call? How many calls did you end up doing? Like one-on-one or
yeah,
in-person
I
meetings?
was,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd probably say around there, maybe a bit more. Yeah,
Okay.
it's tough to
And
know. Yeah,
so this was mostly December, but you continued doing it kind of more, I assume, more over the phone and more Zoom, like January,
yeah,
February. And then, yeah,
yeah,
tell me what happened. Suddenly, I think you were with us in the academy. You were still like had to do mock interviews. You hadn't even really started doing too much mocks yet or anything like that. So
yeah,
tell me what happened. Like, and this is a warning to everyone out there that starts networking. This is oftentimes how it works, especially for lateral hire. So go ahead and tell them what happened.
yeah. No, so basically, I'd actually met up with my VP in November.
Mhm.
So it's one of the first ones that I did. Met her in person, and it was just a normal conversation. At that point, I really wanted an understanding of the industry, how I should approach it. I didn't have a good idea of how M&A operates within banks,
Mhm.
talking about the product groups and the sector groups. Um, and that was it. We left the conversation, and then it was probably the middle of January. She reached out to me saying they had a position open and she would like to talk to me. Um, so obviously I said yes, and I was interviewed by her. It was relatively informal.
Mhm.
I mean, I must have made some impression on the first coffee chat we had. Then I did a case study along with two other interviews, and that was it. And then this all happened over a space of 3 weeks, if that.
Mhm.
And then I got the job offer there. At that point, I was about to automatically at BDO would have renewed my contract. So then my notice period would have gone from 1 month to 3 months. So
Oh gosh.
she wanted me to resign
Start.
before that
Yeah.
happened. So she they also had a deadline to work with. So I told them this is the date where it changes. So if you give me a contract before then I can join you within a month.
Yeah.
So that kind of worked in my favor in that
Yeah, it's almost like an
instance.
exploding offer or like
Yeah,
that's the urgency always helps. So it almost like they gave you an expedited timeline,
correct.
which is always great.
Yeah.
I think
Mm,
there's something to be said for that is like when the fear of loss of losing you as a candidate made you more
yeah.
a more like attractive candidate for them. They're like, well, we got to get Luca. What if he is the best person we see over the next like 3 months and we
Yeah.
miss out on him? That's awesome. And so tell me a little bit about like, was the case hard yeah, in terms of like, was it like a three statement modeling case, like, or just more of a business like consulting case?
It was pretty because now I'm on the buy side team, and she wanted the test was largely assessing my ability to research and present companies long lists.
Yeah.
So and it was an Excel, a Word document, and a PowerPoint. Um, it was fine. I didn't particularly struggle with that, although I was searching private companies without access to any database. So that that part was very challenging, trying to get information
Yeah.
on companies that don't present information. Um, but overall, I mean, I did spend quite a lot of time on it. Took it very seriously, but I wouldn't say it was, you know, something particularly challenging.
Did you have to like
Um,
present it or was it something more you just handed in?
I just handed it in.
Handed
Yeah,
in. Got it.
yeah.
And then I guess kind of looking back over the whole outcome and what happened, any kind of advice you would give either to yourself 6 months ago or to anyone else kind of in a similar spot, maybe they're working in a job post graduation that they want to
Mm,
kind of make a transition. Any advice?
yeah, for me, yeah, like you said, if I had to go back, I know everyone does emphasize it, but it must be because it's true. But the networking is definitely the most essential part to the whole process.
Hmm.
Um, and I understood that. So that's not something I would change. But what I was finding challenging is that whilst doing all the networking, I was also trying to learn the technicals and the modeling.
Mhm.
And to balance that was pretty tricky. So I would say because I was working for 3 years, I should have just learned the technicals, one of the first things I did, and then started the networking when I had the opportunity to leave BDO and join a new company. That's when I should have just dedicated all my time to networking, having already memorized and learned the technicals and valuations.
Yep.
That I probably would have changed, probably would have made it a bit less stressful, the whole process for me.
Yeah. What strikes me about your story is the fact that you leveraged your time off in December to really scale up your networking and like give
Hmm.
yourself just so many I know it ended up being one of the first you did.
Hmm.
Usually it ends up being the reverse where you get better at the
Yeah.
networking as you do more.
Mm,
But the good point is like the part is you probably didn't try to um, you probably didn't try to kind of show off in that initial meeting with her. Like you
mm,
probably expressed your ignorance and she
mm,
probably appreciated that transparency and the humble, like, approach you took. So like that can come, like the likability just matters and the
mm.
authenticity just matters usually more than anything. If they feel like
Yeah.
you're smart and you can pick up things, they know you're going to be fine within a month or two on the job. So,
Yeah.
um, I think that's probably the impression you left. Ideally, I try to tell people like I think that's just a great piece of advice. Like if you're on holiday and you can meet people in person,
Yeah.
how many people did you meet in person out of the say 50 or 60
Um,
people?
it wasn't many. Like I said, it's always difficult to arrange that.
But the VP
And
was one of them, correct?
yeah, yeah. So I would say I probably did seven in person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
There's something to
seven
be said for
people.
that. It's I think one of the reasons why we always suggest like for people who don't live in a city or
Mm,
they live outside, like students, like if you can make a trip and
yeah.
out of the 50 people or 80 people you spoke with, if you can just meet 10 to 15 of them,
Mm,
typically those end up being stronger relationships you can pull on later. So I
mm.
think that's
And I would say other than that, meeting him in person, I always try to organize a Teams call rather than just a phone call. I think it's much more
face to
powerful
face.
seeing
Yep.
someone's face when they're speaking. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Awesome, Luca. Well, I appreciate you sharing your story. Congrats on all the success. And of
Pleasure.
course, we'll be here. Hope to stay in touch. Let us know if we can be helpful in the future.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.